Welcome to the Classroom Brew podcast. The teacher podcast is a little bit like drunk history. But wait, do you guys actually drink while you record episodes? Yeah. Actually. Yeah. Welcome back to Classroom Brew. This is episode 89 now. And for this one, someone gave me this idea on Instagram. And other podcasters, I'm sure, do this. But we're going to try doing Instagram Live. That's why you see this little orange thing here. That is actually a stand. Let's see. I haven't done this a whole lot. While I'm kind of setting this up, if you have not already, make sure rate and review whatever app you're listening to. And let's get the lighting going. Look at that. Now we're a professional production. Jesus. Weird start, huh? So the other part that I wanted to mention too is that we've also got the student series coming up pretty soon. So if you would like if you have a few questions that you would like to ask some students, I have about a handful of seniors that I'm going to have them sign a release, and then we'll ask them a few different questions. But if you have something that you are interested in knowing about their lives or what it was like as a high school student, whatever the case may be, make sure you can just DM that. That's at Classroom Brew on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram's the big one. And here we go, Instagram Live. So make sure that you actually get that going. All right, and we are going live. Let's see, how's it sound? Video's good. Sweet, we got Instagram Live, we've got audio is kicking, beautiful, and video is going. No clue if it's a weird time of day for people to check out a podcast, and this won't come up for, you'll see it live right now if you're checking us out on Instagram, but it won't come live for another 2 weeks on podcast apps and YouTube. Anyway, right now I've got a Vista Bay hard seltzer and a lemon shandy from Shoreview. That's pretty good, to be honest with you. Had a little bit of each before we hit record. So one thing, hang on. And again, Instagram Live people, we are recording for the podcast, video and audio, of course. If you have any questions for students when I do the student series this year, make sure you DM us those different questions to ask the kiddos. Anyway, I was reading this article about Uber, and Uber apparently has a new feature where you can go with quiet mode. So, like, those people that don't really feel like talking to the driver, they can just, I think it's for, Uber Deluxe, quiet mode, if you don't feel like chatting. And we've all had that one Uber driver that's a little bit too chatty. And I was thinking, how great that would be if I could have my deluxe class or something like that. I could have a quiet mode class. I'm sure some teachers had, made, a sign or something creative like that. I was thinking, how great it would be. I'll pay a little bit extra to have my class go into quiet mode. That'd be great. Because we've all had that person that just talks for too long. And it's kind of like this professor that I had this one time in undergrad. It was my freshman year. And we were taking notes. It was an anthropology course and heavy Brooklyn accent. And she was telling us this story about, or this theory that she had about coffee shops and the whole sociological phenomena about coffee shops. And the whole time just heavy Brooklyn accent. Coffee. Who's going to pay for the coffee? Which coffee shop do you go to? Why do we drink coffee? Is there something with beans? What is it with the beans? You get coffee beans, but what if you get espresso and cappuccino? Is that a real word? That's not a real word. And she goes on and on. I'm not kidding. This was like a 50-minute lecture, and she went on for about 48 of those minutes just talking about coffee. And I don't doubt that she had this like fantastic anthropological, sociological thesis that she was formulating. But maybe don't try working out those theories with a bunch of undergrad freshmen. I'm sure there were upperclassmen too, but some undergrads at 8:30 in the morning on like a Wednesday midweek. So I just remember coffee. It's also the same teacher that a student was, another undergrad was taking photos of her slideshow when she was doing her lecture. And at a certain point, she just turns to her and she goes, "Now, why do you think that is a good way to take notes? Is that useful for you? Your camera's got a flash on it. It's got a flash. Turn off the flash." And she just starts berating this student. Not berating, that's a harsh word. But she starts talking to the student, lecturing her mid-lecture about why you shouldn't just take pictures and you should write your notes, which I agree. But yeah, she just kept going. That would have been a great moment to use the quiet mode for that professor. But I also saw that there's a new Batman. It's no longer Ben Affleck. It's not Vampire Diaries, whatever the hell. Twilight, Robert Pattinson or something. And like, I don't know. All right, I guess. I don't care that much, but he doesn't seem like Ben Affleck, even Christian Bale, like they got jacked. Like they were huge guys, like these huge presences. And now you're going to go with the guy from Twilight? Like super pale guy with the, like he's got good hair, I guess. He might do the Bruce Wayne part well, but like are you going to use motion capture for the Batman part? Like they did motion capture of Josh Brolin for Thanos because they're trying to make a purple being that's like 8 feet tall and like 500, 600 pounds of just pure muscle. Like, I guess you could do motion capture for Robert Pattinson as Batman. So just to make him a buff, regular human being without any extra skills. I don't know. Take with that what you will. You could cast me as Batman if that's the case. My guess is Robert Pattinson's, what? 160 pounds, 170 pounds, something like that. Maybe he's a little bit taller, a little lankier. I think I'm about 190 at this point, so I'm not that much better, but certainly a step up. Of course, we know that he's going to have some crazy transformation once he gets going with filming, because there's always those crazy body transformations for actors, which I would love. I need someone to just be like, "Hey, idiot, eat this. We're going to do this training together," so that way there's no thinking on my part. Anyway, back on it. So Instagram Live people, if you've got questions for students for the upcoming student series, make sure you hit that up, and rating and reviews on the podcast. So read an article recently about arming teachers, and the author was questioning whether or not it actually made schools safer. And of course, the answer is probably not. 99% positive on that one. And I thought, okay, let's do a little bit more digging here. Is it actually, because they're actually approving arming teachers in schools, which is wild to think about. Like Jack, when we did, it was very early in the podcast, we did arming nuns in schools, and we talked all about that. And I agreed with something that Jack said, where he was like, I don't trust some of the adults in the room with a weapon. Like some of my own colleagues, I would never want to see them wielding a weapon. So, which by the way, viewers of Instagram Live, thanks for checking out the first few minutes of the episode. You can check out this episode 89 next Thursday, or whatever that date is, on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. And live video. Dope. You can tell I'm a very pro at this. Cool. Weird time of day. probably only like a handful of people that actually checked that out on Instagram, but that's okay. Anyway, and I agree with Jack, what he said. And a number of teachers that I'm sure have written op-ed pieces and have called in or have talked about this in their departmental meetings, that I would not want a teacher to be armed. And in terrific research fashion, preparing for this episode, I thought, let's look up incidents with teachers or schools where a weapon is involved. And you'd be surprised. One of the first ones that I found in recent news was an Alabama teacher whose gun discharged on accident. Or I'm sorry, substitute teacher in Alabama in a class of first graders, and his gun accidentally went off. Now, I complain about subs sleeping in my class, not doing anything to help my students or give them the work or put forth any sort of effort. You heard me on episode 86 complain about my sub that did an awful job. Truly awful. Sorry you couldn't play Farmville because there's no computer when I'm not there. Put the laptop away and no, there's no desktop. Sorry, not sorry. But if I had this sub who had a gun that discharged, I don't know if I can complain anymore, because imagine being that teacher. You know the mind fuck of figuring out, oh my God, this was my classroom that this gun went off in a class full of first graders? Of course it's in Alabama, the same state that's doing all this new pro-life legislation, getting rid of abortion, even if it's incest or if it's rape, which is just absurd for multiple reasons. Not to get into that too much. That's a huge can of worms. So strike one for Alabama and strike one for teachers, especially subs, being accountable for a weapon. And I don't think that wasn't even the policy. So, of course, he got arrested for that as soon as he figured it out. Yeah, I can't even imagine. It's like that. I don't know if it was an officer or a gun safety guy that's talking about, you always make sure the weapon is unloaded, and it goes off, and he didn't expect it. He's talking about, make sure you always point the weapon down as he's pointing it up in the air, and it goes up into the ceiling, and some shards and stuff of those hanging ceiling tiles get over a bunch of kids. Same thing, except for I think this was in the guy's pocket. So he's first off, no safety on. Did you have a Glock or something where there is no safety? And the audacity of this guy, he's from Alabama and he's probably retired and probably doesn't give a shit anymore. So I get it. But you had a gun go off on accident in your pocket? Who are you, Plaxico Burress? Do you guys remember Plaxico Burress? At the time, he was a receiver for the Giants and he accidentally shot himself. Come on, dude. How did you at any point become an educator of children if you had a gun go off? That puts you in the same territory as Plaxico Burress when it comes to responsibility in the classroom. I would trust Plaxico Burress in an Alabama classroom more than this sub-teacher. Not to shit all over sub-teachers, it's this one in particular. I'm sure there's a bunch of fantastic teachers, but how does this even happen? Between Plaxico Burress and the gun safety guy, now there's a substitute teacher in line for that. Who else has accidentally shot themselves as a result? So you talk about safety in schools. Imagine if this was actually a policy. Nationwide, every teacher is armed, and a teacher leaves for the day. I have to lock up pencils and laptops and projector cords and shit so it doesn't get stolen. Imagine if you have a gun to account for. Now, granted, it would be safely stored, but I have a pass that's gone missing almost every day this year. It never did last year. This is an entirely new issue this year. I'm thinking of Devin Siebold on his podcast, Crying in My Car. He was talking about the crazy passes that some teachers have. It's like a competition. I just had a big placard, and it never went missing last year. It's our school-wide, we have to use this pass. The damn thing goes missing every other class period and somehow finds its way back. So then I make a big chart paper substitute, and that one goes missing. So could you imagine a weapon on a day that I'm not there, or a day that I get pulled out for an IEP meeting or something like that? You think I'm going to trust that armed firearm with ammunition, even in a lockbox? Absolutely not. But anyways, famous people. Let's try famous people. Famous purple. Nope. Famous people who have accidentally shot themselves to put this guy into character, and then here we go. This guy's not famous, but now he is. He came up, the substitute. Oh, it's taken it to a dark place. Thank you, internet. So yeah, I would not trust it. So strike one on weapons actually causing. Now, granted, I'm not saying, I talked about this previously in episode 88, the need for more safety regards and things like that. But I don't know if what arming teachers is going to be the answer. I give up looking for that. Okay, so strike one. Really, I'm just going to count it as strikes 1 and 2 because it was that bad and it's Alabama. So sorry, Alabama. The other one, North Carolina. It's all east and south. That's the issue. A North Carolina teacher, not a sub, was accused of storing a student's gun, saying, "Yeah, you can pick it up at the end of the day." I've taken phones and done that. I've confiscated lighters, but they don't get it back. It's against the student code of conduct. Could you imagine? Yeah, man, just make sure, put the safety on, put it in my desk. I'll see you after 8th. You can pick it up then. How do you... No metal detectors? This kid got through, and then this is the teacher is the first line of defense for, hey, maybe we shouldn't have this weapon in school? Like, no, Timmy, put it in my desk. You can pick it up later. Like, you got to be kidding me. How does this even happen? What's the first interaction like? How did that happen? Like, I see, like, food, for example. I give a new rule recently because there's been a lot of mess, and it's an old building that I work in, saying, okay, guys, we're not doing food anymore, and class has become too big of a mess. And a kid has, like, a bag of chips or something like that. And so I just, like, took it, crunched it, threw it out, gave the kid $1 later, reimburse you for that. I can afford that one. So imagine if it was like, all right, guys, no weapons, and then a kid has like a Glock, like, oh man, like, Mr. F, come on, man, it's just, I need it for later. Like, okay, first off, minor. That's another thing. I think this teacher was accused of endangering a minor and minors and everyone in the school. But how do you have that first interaction where the teacher realizes, like, oh shit, this guy's got a weapon? Or maybe a female student, I don't know, I can't assume that. But what? How does you... I can't even wrap my head around this. Between the guy that it accidentally goes off in a classroom full of first graders, I wonder how... I forgot to look up how old the student was. I'm assuming in high school, but I don't know. At the same time, maybe this is an elementary school kid that's walking around with a loaded 9mm or whatever. The more I think about it, just if you're listening to this and if you're not driving or at work or it's an acceptable time of day, I think just we should all just hats off to you, teacher that's not very bright. Unbelievable. Between the Plaxico Burress substitute. Jeez. A teacher that's treating a loaded gun like it's gum that's going to get stuck on the bottom of their desk. That's unbelievable. Like, pick it up at the end of the day? I truly hope that this is like a false accusation or something. But here's the thing. Who is going to go that far out to make up that kind of an accusation? That's insane to me. Wild. Anyway, I had for my AP kids, sorry, this is a little tangent. I just thought of it, but my AP kids, we watched Hereditary, which is a psychological thriller. Get it? AP psychological thriller. And there's a part where like one of the son is in school. I think it's his history class too, and he like has a moment where he's possessed and goes like, and then just bangs his head on the table. And there are multiple points in that movie when kids would just look at me like, did you see that? And I'm like, yeah, I saw that. And when this kid hits his head, they're all like, oh my God, didn't expect that. And I was like, if any of you try that as a prank, I'm failing you automatically. Don't try that shit. Scare the hell out of me. Just like I did duck and cover in my U.S. history class. And I was joking with students, like, I'll give you extra credit if you do, not in my class. I swear, if you do this in my class, you're done for the end of the year, writing you up. But in another teacher's class, if they like turn the lights off and then turn them back on at any point, pretend that's you seeing the flash, and then you all get under your desks and duck and cover just to mess with someone. And someone's got to take a video of this. This has to, I have to have a witness. But don't be obvious, like, oh, we're doing this thing, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. So I guess to go back to my original plan for this, when I was writing this episode and thinking about guns in school and safety for students and arming teachers and all this stuff that's in the media, it wouldn't surprise me if Betsy DeVos, grizzly bears and all that shit, which seems like such a distant nightmare. I would say distant memory, but no, distant nightmare. And I guess it kind of brings me back to my original point that if it were up to me and we were deciding on the safety of students, the safety in schools, things like that, I would love to go, hey, local legislator, Betsy DeVos, whoever you are, I would like to go with the gun-free mode. Uber has quiet mode. I'd like to do the school, like maybe this is the deluxe version, but I'd like to go gun-free, please. If we could do that, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Also, can you stop cutting things in education? We really can't spare another $2. So, like, could we not cut it by billions? Because it's really kind of, it's kind of tricky. I know you want to give us like AR-15s, but like we could use some crayons and markers and chart paper and things like that. That'd be really great. Also, my desktop or my laptop in my room, it's about 100 years old. It takes about 2 hours to load. I'm still waiting to see what happened with OJ. So if we could hurry this up and bring us into the 21st century, because we're still in the 19th, that would really be great. So if we could, again, just, switch away from this whole arming teachers thing. And I'd love the gun-free mode in my school and all schools in this country. Thank you. Not to shed a comedic light. There's, of course, been a lot of violence in schools. The North Carolina incident, Colorado incident recently, near the anniversary of Columbine, what I was talking about in last week's previous episode. But it really is interesting that we somehow have, anytime it's in the news, you search teachers. I have a news app on my iPad, and I like to tag education and teachers, and it's almost always negative, which isn't surprising to me. The only time you really see anything positive for teachers is when it's being posted by teachers themselves. So really, I don't talk about these things to shine a negative light on teachers. It's more so to shine a light on the idiocy of these potential policies that they want to talk about. So I figured to close this out, it's been a while since we've done one of these. Some of you guys loved the How Would You Handle It by Adam Poldolner. These are questions for teachers to ask themselves. So we could kind of dive into a few of these. Now, yeah, what's great about this book, highly recommend it. I did this for Jen's class. If you remember, I did the Q&A at UIC. And what's great about this is that it's good for someone that's been in teaching for a little bit, been in it for a while, and people that are about to enter it, because you can really think about these things that aren't taught in a class. So, Jen, this was great that you suggested it. I use it quite a bit now. It's also, truly, this is a book I wish I had encountered in my own teacher preparation and early days as a teacher. Mark Larson, author and professor of education and Golden Apple Fellow. So, I don't know. I don't have any of these in mind, really. Number 235 on page 58. How do you accept students for who they are as students while simultaneously encouraging them to move in the direction you want them to go? Is this a contradiction or resolvable paradox? Now, one thing that I really notice is that there are some students that come in smelling like marijuana. Clearly, either before school or during school, somehow, they have found a moment to blaze up, as they say. And while sometimes it's nice to have the mellow effect on those students. A lot of times it's my high energy male students that you can tell when they have and have not had some sort of influence on their body chemistry. But at the same time, they can be more productive. Now, there's times where it's like, hey, you really cannot be in here right now smelling like that. Okay. It's very loud in here already. Don't need you increasing the volume. Two different type of loud. Just saying, volume, high energy. And so my charge for some of those kids is to get to that productive, non-disruptive state without. So while I get that there are a number of reasons why some students are doing that before school. Maybe it's how they get through the day. They are self-medicating, but they're still minors, and that's just as bad as showing up to work under the influence or anywhere that you shouldn't, driving, whatever. So it's kind of meeting them halfway, really. Now, I'm not saying that, legalization, I'm sure, will happen at some point, but there's a time and place for that in school, really. That's not it. But the ownership really shouldn't, if you ask me, it should be as soon as they enter the door. And I get it, maybe it's just hard with a large group of students, but you can kind of tell. It's always interesting what their excuses are. Like, oh, I was just around it. Like, you're not making it any better, buddy. But yeah, that was one that I kind of thought about instantly. Teachers should be no, I'm not doing that. Students should get paid for good grades. Absolutely not. Why are you trying to make internal locus of control external? Some of these are great. An administrator might say, a union rep might say. It's a shout out to Adam Poldolner. Religion. Some of these are great. Big fan. 53. Well, this is good. 217. Would you give money to a student? Under what circumstances? I have kids that ask me this all the time. Hey, Mr. F, you got $2, you got 25 cents, you got XYZ, whatever it is. And I'm like, stop asking me. First off, I pay with everything with my debit card and never carry cash. But also, that's such a new thing where kids think like I've got an ATM here without having to pay it. Like my teacher's just a resource. That never crossed my mind to even think let me just ask my teacher for a little bit of cash. I really want to get some Takis or whatever, which, by the way, I hate those things. The only time that I have given students money is obviously crunch the chip bag. Like you disobeyed that sounds bad. Didn't listen to a classroom rule that I have no food right now in class. So I'm going to crunch up your chips so they're uneatable and throw them out. But also, here's $1 after we talk about this. But that's really it. It's really uncomfortable, though. I'm not going to lie. Whenever someone's like, that's the other thing, too. I heard my kids, they were saying, this school's busted up. These teachers can't even give me, $3. They're so poor. That's not it, buddy. That's not it at all. But you shouldn't be going to your teachers for financial comp without giving some sort of a service or justification or anything like that. That's such a new thing. That blows my mind. What sort of student behavior would you consider threatening? My definition of this has definitely changed over the years. Over the past 2 years, really, at the school that I'm at. It's become a lot more lax now that I'm more familiar. Mental health issues. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. It's Adam Poldolner's How Would You Handle It? What if you call a parent about a behavior problem and she flatly denies that the child is capable of that behavior? I wish we had body cams, teacher body cams, to say, hey, here, you witness what they're doing. Most of the time, I'll be honest with you, when I encounter a parent and tell them what their kid is doing, the apple doesn't fall far from the English. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So I'll say that a student did something they like, your student is very profane constantly. We really need to work on this. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. This better bedside manner when I'm actually with a parent. And the parent will be like, well, what the fuck do you mean that they're fucking smart? And you're like, jeez, can you back up for a second? This is not the way to interact. So I see where, Timmy gets it. By the way, I don't have a student named Timmy. It's just my go-to when I think of it. Oh, we lost the video. Hang on. Let's get her back going real quick. There we go. Sorry about that. So that was Adam Poldolner's How Would You Handle It? Hope you guys enjoyed that. And welcome back, video. That was only a few seconds, but you still had the audio. Ooh, nasty. So that's about all I had planned. I think we covered it all. We had the Uber stuff, metal detectors, and depiction of teachers in the news and all that stuff. I don't really take detailed notes like I used to. Just a few bullet points, really, to kind of get myself in the right frame of mind. But if you haven't already, rate and review whatever app you're in right now. If you could go to the rating and review section, we've been doing a lot better recently. If you also want to check out comedians, what was it? Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I think it's stand-up comedians. Devin Siebold's podcast, Crying in My Car. That's become one of my new favorites. Really funny. Mike and Devin, they do some great segments like Teachers in the News, Not Sleeping with Students, or whatever the segment's called. So that's a lot of fun. You might see that in the suggested if you are subscribed to Classroom Brew. Excuse me. Again, if you would like to reach out, if you have a question in mind for me to ask students on the student series, I've got a handful of kids that are pretty excited about doing it. And I think they a lot of times open up. There's something about pulling someone to the side and there's a microphone and a certain degree of anonymity that I think really helps seniors that are moving on to bigger and better things after high school. I think that really opens up the floor for better conversation and getting an inside look into their lives, which is great. So that's coming soon. Again, just email me, classroombrew@gmail.com, or reach out on social media. Probably Instagram is the best one, @classroombrew. If you have any questions that you would like me to ask. Pretty excited about that. Two different, lemon shandy and then black cherry, two different flavors entirely. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Be sure to also check out the Lazy Teacher podcast. Brian's doing video podcasts every single week, unlike myself, because I'm lazy. But that was all I had. So until next week, thank you so much for listening. And as always, class dismissed.